In a sense, the inspiration for Heartland Farm can be traced back to 1977 when Kentucky farmer Wendell Berry wrote the book The Unsettling of America. In it, he talks about how agribusiness is taking farming out of its cultural context and away from families, and how, consequently, modern society is becoming more and more disconnected from the land and intimate knowledge of it. This worrying yet honest and powerful book was one of many catalysts that eventually led the remaining family farmers of the United States to drive their tractors to Washington, D.C. to protest the takeover of agribusiness. This movement deeply affected the Dominican Sisters of Great Bend, especially because many of them had come to the order from family farms. So, in 1982, a study was undertaken to see how the sisters could get involved and directly support the ideals and sentiments of family farming. 4 years later, in 1986, it was decided that the best way forward would be to purchase a family farm of their own and develop it in a way that would reflect Wendell Berry's vision. At its heart, this would mean building a strong community that strived concertedly towards working with the land in an effort to protect and preserve it, whilst also sustaining their lives from it. At the head of the committee driving this vision was Sister Betty Jean Goebel. Her end goal was to create Heartland Ministries that would include the Heartland Centre for Spirituality, which is still being run to this day at the Mother House in Great Bend, an organic farm, which would later become Heartland Farm, and a holistic health centre. With this firmly in mind, the sisters began their search and, shortly thereafter, found a suitable 80-acre farm that was for sale just 14 miles west of Great Bend. The farm was owned by Tom and Betty Edwards, but due to their deteriorating health, the Edwards had decided to sell and move into town. After much discussion and organisation, the Dominican Sisters went ahead and purchased the farm in November of 1987. The sale included a 35-acre pasture with a runoff creek, 40 acres in cropland, and 5 acres of homestead. The buildings on the homestead were the farmhouse, the wash house, 2 small cabins, an outhouse, a chicken house, a metal grain storage building that extended into a workshop and a carport, a large animal barn, a pole barn, and a concrete silo. During that same month, the Dominican Sisters hosted what would become the first of many sustainability-driven workshops. This one was on permaculture design, was run through the Heartland Centre for Spirituality, and was hosted by Sister Betty Jean. The workshop lasted 1 week and yielded a potential way forward in design for Heartland Farm. It also brought about many personal connections, including a relationship with Betsy Lyman, who ended up staying on as the farm's first volunteer. 25 years later and the farm's still hosting workshops. Here are the highlights from 2013. Fiberspace, 2013. Hosted by Heartland Farm, Fiberspace is a workshop covering a wide range of fibre-related techniques, including spinning, weaving, and nooking. If you're just getting into the hobby, or are a fully fledged fibreholic, there's something for everyone at Fiberspace. Demonstrations, tools for hands-on practice, and fibre-related discussions. There's always something either to try, talk about, or observe. You can even visit our alpacas and see one of the greatest fibres in its natural state. Want to come and concentrate on one specific skill? That's fine. Want to come and try a bit of everything? That's also fine. Whatever works for you, works for us. Not only an informative programme, Fiberspace is also a place to connect with like-minded people, to get away from the noise of the city, and, most importantly, to have fun. All ages are welcome and accommodations are available for overnight stay. To sign up for our next Fiberspace programme, please go to heartlandfarm-ks.org. There you can also find out about other programmes hosted by Heartland Farm. Expressions of the heart come to life at Heartland Farm. Heartland Farm's third workshop of the year hosted John Tyson, a retired electronic technician with over 10 years of experience setting up his own off-the-grid homestead. For the first time ever, John agreed to talk publicly about how his life had taken an unexpected turn into the world of solar sustainability. Unlike many, John's lifestyle change hadn't been sparked by a desire to save the planet. Instead, it had been a financially driven move, catalysed by ludicrous demands made by the local electric company. Refusing to cave into said demands, John took it upon himself to find an alternative way to power his home. 10 years later, and John and his wife Susan have succeeded in their goal. They live, creature comforts and all, with absolutely no reliance on the grid. They've done so by harnessing the awesome power of the sun through the ingenious devices we call solar panels. During the workshop, John taught us how to follow in his footsteps, first with a talk, and then with a hands-on installation demonstration. By the end of the day, we, as a group, had not only increased our knowledge, but had also installed 2 brand new solar panels for the farm's hermitage. 'Twas but a small step in the right direction, but a step nonetheless. So, thanks to John for sharing his wisdom, and here's to the continued march towards a better world. To keep up to date with our future workshops, please go to heartlandfarm-ks.org. Expressions of the heart come to life at Heartland Farm. 1988 was the farm's first proper year, with both Sister Imelda Schmidt and Sister Rosrita Weber moving out to the farm to live and work full-time. During this year, the cedar tree shelter belt was planted and drip lines were installed for their water supply. Hemp plants were mowed down, chickens and geese were purchased, and Sister Imelda set up a massage studio in one of the cabins. It was during this time that Larry and Laurie Hessed visited the farm with an interesting proposal. They were both looking for a rural setting to raise their 3 children in, and after Laurie had taken the permaculture workshop the previous year, Heartland Farm had sprung to mind as a candidate. The sisters and the Hessed family both agreed that living together would be mutually beneficial for everyone. So the plan was made to move an additional house onto the homestead, and for Larry to be employed as the farm's manager. Soon after, what is now Hedge House was purchased and placed over a concrete basement, providing a home with 5 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms for the family. It was then in June 1988 that Larry, Laurie, and their 3 children, Joel, Kyle, and Kezia, moved out to the farm and into their new home. During the early months, whilst the farm was still setting up its foundations, Herschel and Johnny McCauley, 2 Native Americans, came out from time to time to help with the work. This connection had come about during Sister Betty Jean and Sister Imelda's time working in Oklahoma with the Core Indians. Keeping with their native traditions, Herschel and Johnny helped build a sweat lodge near the main garden area, and during their stays helped lead sessions. However, out of respect and safety concerns, the sweat lodge was dismantled shortly after Johnny's death. Come 1989, 2 new people joined the farm's community in the form of Chuck and Lucretia Crimmins. They had just completed a Peace Corps placement in Ecuador, and after an extensive search throughout the United States for a farm they could settle down in, they chose Heartland Farm. Betsy, the farm's first volunteer, was now moving on to return to her graduate studies, and this left the cabin she'd resided in free for the Crimmins. During this same time, Sister Rosarita also moved on, and Sister Betty Jean moved out to the farm full-time after completing her role as director of Heartland Centre for Spirituality. As the year ticked on, Chuck, Lucretia, Larry, and the rest of the community completed the gardens with double-dug beds, and began to plan for the design of a passive solar home for Chuck and Lucretia's more permanent abode. Fortunately, Sister Betty Jean's family owned the Star Lumber Company, and they were able to provide all the lumber needed for the building of the home. And so, with old-time values in mind, the home was built, with the help of friends from the Mennonite Church in Pawnee Rock, the Baptist Church in Great Bend, the Dominican Sisters, and neighbouring friends of other farms. In the fall of 1990 it was completed, and is now known as Cedar House. It was in this home that Chuck and Lucretia's first child Molly was born in June of 1992. And in that same year as Molly's birth, many changes befell the farm. Some fortunate, some not so fortunate. Sister Betty Jean died of cancer in January, and Sister Terry Wassinger came to take over the office work 4 months later. Sister Virginia Pearl followed another 4 months after that, and around the same time the first bridge across the creek was built. A year later, in 1993, some renovation work started on the silo. Its original chute was removed, its coloured glass was installed, and the surrounding area was tidied. 1993 also commemorated the farm's 5th year anniversary. To mark the occasion, the community put together a report to show what had been achieved in the first 5 years and what was hoped to be achieved in the 5 years following. By this point, the original vision was really starting to take shape, and was expanded upon in 1994 when the Straw Bale Hermitage was built, along with the help of Cadman Whitty, friend of the Hessids. In the spirit of shared learning and growth, the farm made a workshop out of it, and 30 people came to learn and help over the span of a weekend. Following with the trend of establishing abodes for the growing community, Elm House was moved onto the homestead later in the year, and volunteers began staying in the 2 basement apartments shortly after. Although the highlight of the year came when renowned author and activist Thomas Berry visited the farm to give a talk. Along with Wendell Berry, he was another major influence in the movement towards a more earth-friendly way of life, so to have him as a guest was a great honour. The next year, 1995, was especially busy, with many faces coming and going throughout. Chuck and Lucretia Crimmins and their now 3-year-old daughter Molly moved to Arkansas, where they still live to this day. And Sister Mary Ellen Data arrived some months later to work in tandem with Sister Imelda as a massage therapist. A few months after that, Ted and Nancy Lewis joined the farm to work as gardeners, moving into Cedar House with their 2 daughters, Ellie and Clarity. Rounding off the year, Anita Kane moved into the upstairs section of Elm House and in the process set up a gift shop for her crafts and the like. The following 5 years brought about 4 departures, with Sister Imelda, one of the original 3, moving to a new ministry, Anita Kane moving back to Florida, and Ted and Nancy moving to Oregon, which freed up Cedar House and allowed it to become the farm's guest lodgings. At the turn of the millennium, the Straw Bale Art Studio was built, and the year after that, Matt and Kathy Crable came to live in Elm House until 2002, taking up Anita's previous spot. Come 2003, and what has now become one of the farm's main staples were introduced to the homestead. Of course, I'm talking about the alpacas. So, here's a quick look at their history from 2003 to 2013. Here at Heartland Farm, we raise a small group of Wakaya alpacas. Not only are they great companions, but they also offer us top-grade fibre and quality manure. It all started in 2003 when 3 alpacas were bought by the farm and introduced to the homestead. These 3 were Marshmallow, who's still with us, Daisy, who is too, and Serendipity, who's now passed on. Trissy followed just 3 months later at the beginning of 2004, and by summertime of that same year, both Trissy and Daisy had delivered the farm's first crias. Trissy's came first and he was named Ashwani, which is Hindi for firstborn. Daisy's came second and he was named Albie, although, unfortunately, he's now passed on too. Ashwani's still with us, however, and is now the herd sire, helping to create lots of alpacas of his own, both here at the farm and at others. From the get-go, the farm decided to name the crias according to the year they were born. This way it would be easier to remember how old they were. So, all the crias born in 2004 had names starting with the letter A, and all the crias born in 2005 had names starting with the letter B, and so on. Now, in 2013, we're on our J year and have seen 5 new beautiful crias grace our herd. They are, in order of birth, Joy, Jasper, Jojo, Jubilee, and Java. Our herd is a friendly bunch, although, like any community, they have their disagreements. Spitting is a common sight when their space is invaded, and the boys occasionally tangle necks in displays of leadership and authority. But on the whole, they're gentle, peaceful creatures. They run and eat and hum and nuzzle, and generally are a pleasure to be around. So here's to many more years of our herd flourishing. May they continue to share their gifts with us and the surrounding community. If you're interested in purchasing any of our alpacas, please contact us at heartlandfarm-ks.org. Expressions of the heart come to life at Heartland Farm. In 2004, a young couple named Jared and Shanna came to work at the farm, and they moved into Elm House. They stayed for around 8 years and played major roles in the ever-developing setup of the farm. When they did eventually move, they didn't move far, setting up a straw bale home of their own just down the road. In 2006, Michelle Quant came to volunteer at the farm, living in Beach House and eventually becoming an employee, before departing around the same time as Jared and Shanna. Come 2007, Larry and Laurie transitioned into Cedar House, turning it once again from guest lodgings to a private abode. To balance things out, it was at this point that Hedge House was renovated to become the guest lodgings instead. 2007 also saw Sister Reen Weeks come to live at the farm, while simultaneously ministering at the Mother House in Great Bend. Then came Sister Jane Belanger. She was one of the founders of Shepherd's Corner, and arrived in August of 2008. For the first year she lived in Hedge House, moving into the main house in 2009 when Sister Reen left and her old room became available. Very quickly, Sister Jane became the go-to person for all the handy jobs around the farm. And to this day in 2013, it's still the case. As the first decade of the new century drew to an end and the new decade began, Larry, who had been the farm's manager for 22 years now, became ill with cancer. Staying at the farm, he went through around a year's worth of treatment before eventually moving to Newton with his wife Laurie, where sadly, he died 2 months later. Soon after Larry's death, Sister Virginia left the farm, but just as old faces left, a slew of new ones arrived. Ben Reeser, Sister Joanne Ice, Sister Marilyn Pearson, countless volunteers, And in 2013, Sister Reen returned also. Which brings us up to the present day, where the farm is once again in transition as Sister Terry Wassinger prepares to leave after 21 long years of service. And of course, this really is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the many faces that have come and gone over the years. Volunteers have come from Switzerland, the Philippines, the Czech Republic, Mozambique, England, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Bolivia, Thailand, and the list goes on. Some have come through word of mouth and societal connections. Others have come through the Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms programme, and more still through the International Volunteers Exchange programme with the Mennonite Church. There have been people of all religions, all ages, male, female, because Heartland Farm has and continues to be a place open to all, a place free from judgment, a place where people can come to learn, love, and grow in harmony with the community and the earth at large. So here's to 25 years of Heartland Farm, and here's to 25 more. Many great things lie in wait just around the corner.